Canada. Fake news. That's what we're doing. All right. So now, fake news fact checkers. There has been a lot of news from some sources and not a lot of news from other sources on this spate. And we're going to call it a spate of doctors suddenly dying in Canada. There were 5 or 6 from the Greater Toronto Area in the month of July alone. This comes at the time of a renewed push for boosters. And don't take my word for it. It's in the Politifact fact check. 5 or 6 doctors, 3 in one hospital, suddenly die in the month of July alone. And what do the fact checkers have to do? They've got to come in and run hardcover to demonize anybody who would ask the questions, call them anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists, and to run hardcover to explain the inexplicable to those who have half a brain left and say, this is very interesting. I don't recall ever in my life hearing, in the absence of some form of an attack or accident, 5 or 6 hospitals in the Greater Toronto Area, 3 in one hospital, suddenly dying, and young. One collapsed while participating in a triathlon, suddenly dying in a month. I don't remember ever hearing that in my life. I don't remember ever hearing about SADs in my life. But you've got to have the media come run hardcover when the inexplicable and unexplainable starts to happen. You need someone to explain it. And who better to explain away uncomfortable facts or uncomfortable situations than the fact checkers? Politifact. I call them Politifake. And I've been on Politifact, but for 2 years. Let me just take this in. There was once a point in my life when I thought fact checkers checked facts. I mean, I remember being ignorant. I remember being in the Matrix. I'm not saying this to say that I'm Neo and I remember being in the system and thinking 60 Minutes was the cornerstone, was the norm, was the standard for journalism, for truth. Sunday nights, we used to watch it. I used to say, if I saw it on 60 Minutes, I would tend to believe it. I remember the progression because I remember people saying, Viva, you idiot. Do you know who this was before Viva, but do you know who owns these fact checks? Do you know who finances these? Do you know which organizations are behind it when you get Snopes, Politifact, Pointer, USA? Do you know who's behind it? Now I know, by the way. Now I have been pulled out of the Matrix. I will never see the world the way I once saw it before, but I'm fortunate enough to be able to remember seeing it the way I saw it when I saw it with blindness. Fact checkers. I actually thought they checked facts. Listen to this one, people. This is the one it's going to quell your concerns about the spate of doctors suddenly dropping dead in the Greater Toronto Area. The claim from the Gateway Pundit. Can't trust them because, well, first of all, the Gateway Pundit has a reputation. The claim, 3 doctors from the same hospital die suddenly in the same week, end quote. And then this is where Politifact splices the claims together, but I know people were saying this. After the hospital mandated a 4th COVID-19 vaccine for employees. 2 conjoined statements there. 3 doctors die. That's one part. They die suddenly. And 3 doctors die suddenly after the hospital mandated a 4th COVID-19 vaccine. And they're still calling it a vaccine here, even though our Chief Medical Officer of Ontario called it a therapeutic. Admitted, recognized, publicly stated it was a therapeutic for obvious reasons, but I'm not a doctor, so I won't say. So that's the claim that they're checking from the Gateway Pundit. The deaths of the 3 doctors were neither sudden, nor linked to COVID-19 vaccines. Thank you. Okay. That's the conclusion that Politifact is stating as the fact in the sub-paragraph of the headline. The deaths of the 3 doctors were neither sudden. They weren't sudden, which is why it made the news and which is why it shocked even the medical community. I'm 1 degree separated from one of the most recent deaths in the Greater Toronto Area hospitals. One immediate connection away. People are devastated. Even people within the medical community are devastated. shocked, and nobody wants to talk about it. So, but don't worry, people. The deaths were neither sudden, and they weren't linked to the COVID-19 vaccines. By the way, when was this published? Oh, July 29th. The deaths occurred in July. They've done it. They've done everything. In one case, they didn't even do an autopsy. I think it was for religious reasons. They didn't even do an autopsy. So don't worry. Politifact just told you. They told you right now. Don't worry about it. Don't look up. If your time is short, like Viva, 2 of the doctors who died had previously been diagnosed with cancer. Oh, okay. According to an obituary and media reports. Oh, so they're relying on the media, state-sponsored, government-funded media in Canada, and the obituaries, which are written by the families of the deceased. 2 of the doctors had previously been diagnosed with cancer. You better tell me when they were diagnosed with cancer, what the stage of that cancer was in terms of potential remission, and then you're going to have to answer me the hard question, PolitiFact. Did you ask whether or not, as some doctors have suggested, that the immunological response triggered by a 3rd and 4th booster, what impact that might have on people who had in the past been diagnosed with cancer? Do you ask that question? I'm going to read the article and see if they ask that question and answer it. The 3rd doctor had been seriously ill. Oh, okay. For how long? Seriously ill for a week? Doesn't answer a damn thing. Seriously ill, have been out of the hospital for months? That might be relevant. They had been seriously ill, though his diagnosis was not disclosed. CTV News. CTV News. Where do we know CTV News from? Where do we know? We just saw them recently. No thanks. Kieran, where do we see CTV News, peeps? Kieran Moore, 1 in 5,000. Oh, yeah. No, that's not the one. CTV News. Sorry, it's 1 in 5,000. Where do we see it? CTV News, people. Oh, that's right. Here it is. City News, not CTV. Ah, damn it. Hold on 1 second. Pretty sure CTV ran the article as well. Nah, forget it. City News and CTV News, they're no different. It is state-sponsored, state-funded, $600 million bailout government news. Cover your butts. The hospitals where the doctors work said their deaths were not related to COVID vaccine. So but just bear in mind, by the way, what you have right here is nothing short of the fact checkers relying on statements from the interested, affected, and grieving parties with no independent verification. A renewed push, and by the way, and this is their fact check, by the way. They confirm, PolitiFact confirms, a renewed push for COVID-19 booster shots has also ushered in a new wave of misinformation, with social media posts suggesting that the vaccine booster was linked to sudden deaths of doctors at one hospital in Canada. 3 doctors from the same hospitals died. We saw this, yada, yada, yada. The caption also said, the hospital claimed that social media rumor of their deaths were related to COVID-19 vaccine is simply not true. Oh, I thought you just said that the statement made by the Gateway Pundit was false and inaccurate when they have made the same qualification of the same qualifier that you just made, PolitiFact. The post was flagged as part of Facebook's effort to combat false news and misinformation on its newsfeed. They quoted it, the hospital, as saying it's simply not true, and Facebook still flags the article. What the Instagram post does not mention is that 2 of the doctors who died had previously been diagnosed with cancer. Oh. And the 3rd doctor had been seriously ill. We know nothing, PolitiFact. You have done nothing of a fact check. Because if it actually turns out that they had been previously diagnosed with cancer, were in remission, were not in a bad state, and then something triggered something within a month, within 2 doctors who had previously been diagnosed with cancer, triggered a serious illness in a 3rd, you haven't fact-checked anything. In fact, all that you've done is come to a conclusion without having gotten to that conclusion. You started at the conclusion and you never got there. Trillium Health Partners, which operates the hospital where the doctors work, said in a July 27 tweet that the deaths were not linked to the COVID vaccine. Oh, okay. Let's just see this. It is with deep sadness that THP mourns the loss of 3 of our physicians who recently passed away. How many times in the history of this hospital have they ever had a tweet like this? Jacob Sawicki, Stephen McKenzie, and Dr. Lawrence Siegel, 3 were respected, who dedicated their lives to caring for their patients and community. It is a immeasurable tragedy. And I would argue that it is aggravated by the unwillingness to even address questions. And just to knee-jerk pretend that there's no problem. Knee-jerk pretend that anybody asking the questions is an anti-vaxxer conspiracy theorist. Now let's get to the part where they actually allegedly debunk it in their response. The rumors circulating on social media is simply not true. Their passings were not related to the COVID-19 vaccine. We ask to please respect their families' privacy during this difficult time. Well, here's a guy who's repeating the to them had cancer. The other head's here. Oh yeah. That even if they had cancer, if something potentially triggers an adverse response in someone who is already immunologically compromised, it's a question to ask. And you see and it's a terrible thing, because what they are doing is they're basically shaming people into not asking the question by saying to ask the question, you're going to be not showing respect for the families who are grieving. It's okay. We got this. We did that part. Trillium Partners says it has 3 main sites: Credit Valley Hospital, Mississauga Hospital, and Queensway Health Center. It is unclear from media reports whether all 3 doctors practiced at the same hospital sites. The deaths appear to occur in a short time frame. It appeared. One died on July 17th. One died on July 18th. And the other one is unclear. It appears that they occurred within 4 days. It appears by the facts. Not they occurred within a short time frame, within 4 days. It appears. Just what else happened that month? Does the article get into it? The Instagram says they died suddenly. Sawicki's wife said her husband's diagnosis of stage 4 gastric cancer, signet ring cell, one of the most aggressive forms of cancer, came as a shock last August. That's a year ago. Mackenzie's office said he had been seriously ill leading up to his death, and his office was permanently closed. The nature of his illness was not disclosed. Siegel's obituary said he died after a ridiculously unfair and hard-fought year-long battle with lung cancer. Our ruling. An Instagram post says 3 doctors from the same hospital die suddenly in the same week after the hospital mandated it. What part of that is false? The deaths were not sudden. 2 of the semantics. These gosh darn fact checks always resort to disingenuous, dishonest semantics. Their deaths were not sudden. I'm sorry. It seems from this fact check, all 3 were relatively quick, which makes them relatively sudden. 2 of the doctors had been previously diagnosed with cancer. Irrelevant. If the deaths were sudden and coincided with what this article recognizes, as was a renewed push for the booster. Did they get it? Does this article not ask the question, did they in fact get a booster? If they hadn't gotten the booster, or they hadn't gotten the 4th booster, the 2nd booster, the 4th shot, would they not have said it in this article? Because that would debunk or at least quell a lot of concerns. People might still have questions. If they hadn't gotten the booster, would this article not have mentioned it? Did this fact check ask that one simple question? The hospital where they work said, of course, because the hospital who just mandated this for everybody, presumably, is going to come out and say, it might have had something to do with that. The hospital might say that. It's egregious. It's egregious, disingenuous wordsmithing to weasel out, not of answering the hard questions, but of even asking the hard questions. And it's enraging. It should enrage everybody, and people should start being vocal about it. And if only one of these doctors would come and discuss with me, even off the record, where I would never mention anything about the name or identifiable factors, identifiable elements of this, of any of the doctors who would come and talk to me. I want to know what's going on in these hospitals, what the consensus is. I know that I've spoken to people on the street. I'm just going to take my shoes off. Who work in the industry. I can't vet what they say independently. I know what I am told behind closed doors. That ends the fact check. They're liars. They're liars through omission because they are not even asking the questions that need to be asked. And then they purport to be fact checks by, as their fact check, citing the interested parties' statements without further verification, without even asking the hard questions, and without providing answers to the hard questions. And anyhow, now we know, by the way, anybody who trusts a fact checker is either me 5 years ago or a willfully blind buffoon who chooses to think that they're chewing on a delicious steak, even though they know it's just the computer telling them what the steak tastes like. Okay, people, did the verdict come in? Why are they having a booster if they're at? But the thing is, the article didn't even ask. It didn't even ask if they in fact had the booster. I suspect they did, because if they didn't, that would have been the easiest thing for the hospital to say. It's not related to the third booster or the fourth booster because they didn't have it. They weren't even working in the hospital.